Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. This is the Finding You broadcast. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025. Tonight, we're talking about couples work, falling in love with your partner's dilemma. This is kind of a subset of the kind of couples work that I talk about. And in fact, I'm doing this sort of as a preview or a teaser to the intensive for couples that's coming up in June that'll be run by myself and my wife, Michelle. Because I think in large part, that's what the great gift of the couples intensive is. It's an intensive where you can come, you can do your own work, you can understand your own process, your own limitations, your own weaknesses. But really, it's an opportunity to witness your partner's dilemma, witness their history. What I like to say for people is that the problems that you have in your coupleship, the problems that you have with your partner, in large part and in a large measure, existed in you and in them long before you ever meet. And part of the gift of that kind of awareness is that you don't take it personally, right? The more clear you become about yourself, what you are, what you're not, who you are, who you're not, the more clear you can become about seeing your partner's dilemma because you don't own it, you don't see it as yourself. So I'm looking forward to tonight, and I think it's a great idea to think about if you're considering the Finding You Couples Intensive coming up. My next intensive that I'll be running will be June 4th through 8th. That's an individual intensive. That's our Finding You intensive. We have an online option May 16th through 18th. July 23rd to 27th is the intensive after June. I'm going to be in the Bay Area next week at the Conscious Parenting Workshop, May 10th, 9 a.m. to 4 local time. And then I'll be doing an online one May 19th, 9 to 4. The couples workshop that I'm talking about, which is basically a Finding You for couples, is June 18th through 22. So this is not for high conflict couples, but this is for people that want to improve their intimacy. Of course, at Finding You, we offer coaching. This can be anywhere, it can be virtual. And the idea is to follow in the same kind of sensibility that I talk about to help you find yourself and not fix yourself. So if you're interested in that, contact us at info@findingyouprograms.com. Any private intensives, any questions, any suggestions that you have for the broadcast, the email is info@findingyouprograms.com. I'm going to be hosting a 5-day workshop in Upper State New York and Rhinebeck, New York at the Omega Institute. That's October 12th through 17th, later this fall. It's relatively inexpensive, around $500. We'll be doing a lot of the Finding You teaching. I'll be lecturing a lot at this. And so if you want to attend that, it's a very affordable, beautiful setting. Go to eomega.org. That is eomega.org, and check out the Audacity to Be You workshop. Lastly, we are just about, I know you've been hearing this for a while now, we're just about to roll out the Finding You Inner Circle for the podcast. This is a subscription and a support for the Finding You podcast. So you'll have access to the live broadcast, be able to submit questions live, watch the video episodes as they are broadcast live. And also I will be releasing private episodes only to the Finding You Inner Circle. Finding You alumni of the Finding You programs that we started last fall in 2024 will be enrolled automatically. Again, for more information, email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. Let me start off with this poetic description of love and coupleship. Love is a temporary madness. It erupts like an earthquake and then subsides. Love is not breathlessness. It is not excitement. It is a promulgation of promises to eternal passion. That is just being in love, which any of us can convince ourselves we are. Love itself is what is left over when being in love has burned away. And this is both an art and a fortunate accident. And this is from Captain Corelli's mandolin. So much of the process of falling in love is an unconscious process. So much of it, we lack our clarity. We get lost in ourselves, right? It's because we're finding something familiar at a deep level. We think we can describe that, the attributes of our partner and what attracted us to us, but it's really something largely unconscious that draws us together. So I'll be talking about that tonight and about how your history, how your partner's history really contribute to this union and why it can be so intoxicating and so easy to lose yourself in the process. I love this quote from Irving Yalom, the great therapist. He says, "I do not like to work with patients who are in love. Perhaps it is because of envy. I too crave enchantment. Perhaps it is because love and psychotherapy are fundamentally incompatible. The good therapist fights darkness and seeks illumination, while romantic love is sustained by mystery and crumbles upon inspection. I hate to be love's executioner." So when the stage of romantic love passes, that early stage, the real test begins to take back the projections and expectations one has put in our partner. We really do often come into marriage with this feeling, this sensation that our partner is going to complete us, that they will become our better half, that they will become the thing that finally saves us from ourselves and our own dilemma. But what happens after this projection dies down and we have to cope with who we are and who they are is the question remains, can I assume responsibility for my own happiness, my own meaning? And if both partners can answer yes, then the marriage relationship begins again and makes way for enlargement. So we have to understand our own, and it benefits us greatly if we can understand our partner's dilemma. Somebody once asked me, in a group setting actually, what is my responsibility? What do we feel like our responsibility was in marriage? What's our duty? What's our job in marriage? And we all had answers. We were all therapists, and so we gave our answers as technically complete as we could. And then the teacher in this course offered the idea, what if your job in marriage was for you to be happy and enjoy your partner? How would you rate your success in that endeavor, in that task, in that responsibility? And it was a humbling experience for us all, right? We all have this idea sometimes, especially when we're young and first in love, that our partner is going to make us happy and that we are going to make them happy. That is the romantic idea in our culture. But when we grow up and mature, we realize that it doesn't work that way. And divorce really does, separation, high conflict, come out of this shattering of that ideal that our partner's job is to make us happy and to fulfill us. So in that respect, marriage is a wonderful pathway to transformation, a wonderful pathway to enlightenment. Like parenting, it's one of the most difficult and important things that we'll ever be a participant in. And if we stick to it and feel like we can find worth in it, then what comes out of it is enlargement, is awareness, and is enlightenment. Falling in love with your partner's dilemma means understanding their history, how it impact, how it shaped them in such a way to be attractive to you and for you to be attractive to them. And like I always say, when I work with people that are on the precipice of breaking up a divorce, I often find that the fissures, the cracks were there all along. And that what is happening at this point in the relationship is that they're being exposed. Everybody's having to take back the projections. I love this idea that I shared in the Audacity View. It comes from somebody else, but I'll quote it here from the Audacity View. It says, whether or not a person is happy is utterly out of your control. Speaking of his wife, he said, we came into this false romantic concept that somehow when we got married, we would become one. And what we realized is that we were two completely separate people on two completely separate individual journeys. And we were choosing to walk our separate journeys together. But her happiness was her responsibility, and my happiness was my responsibility. We decided that we were going to find our own individual, internal, private, separate joy. And then we were going to present ourselves to the relationship and to each other already happy. What a novel idea. This idea that it's not somebody else's responsibility in life to fundamentally make me happy, but rather it's my job to go out and find happiness and present myself to the relationship, to the discussion, to the dynamic, fulfilled. It's only then that I'm really capable of love, because love is a giving thing. If I don't come fed, if I don't come with some sense and some responsibility for my own wholeness, my own happiness, then I'll find myself taking, usually unconsciously. We don't see how much we are taking from the other person, asking of them to do something that I must do for myself, the road that I must walk for myself. What I'm grateful for is to have a partner who has absolutely encouraged and facilitated and been courageous in this process, to lean into her own work. We both had to do that at a certain point to get past that early stage and transition into a more mature version of our own relationship that we call marriage 2.0. And we're still working on that. One of the ideas that we came out with in this transition for us from marriage 1.0 to 2.0 was this idea that I often share was it's not your partner's job to make you happy. That is your job. It is not your job to make your partners happy. That is their job. So much of life is about projection. In fact, the one inevitable truth in psychology that we know, that what does not become conscious in us, what is not owned by us, will eventually be projected out there in the world. If we don't own our responsibility, we will find villains and devils outside of us. We'll find people to hang our resentment, our anger, our unhappiness on. Even in the world today, when you think about how difficult the world, especially the news, because the news feeds into this idea, right? The idea that the world is an impossible place to live right now, and it's so much chaos. But that's not the spiritual journey. That's what the news does to get us to watch, to get clicks, right? They get us addicted to this idea that if I just have all the information, that somehow having all that information will give us control. Like I said a few weeks ago when I was talking about finding peace in uncertain times, if the information gives you marching orders, something to do, fantastic. But if it just feeds this never-ending cycle of information, this idea that if I don't learn and hear what's going on in real time, then I'm going to be lost and out of control and afraid. That's what they're trying to do. But I digress. James Hollis said, of the many projections possible, the most common are those onto the institution of marriage, parenting, and career. Regarding marriage, he said, perhaps no other social contract has so much unconscious baggage imposed upon it. Few at the altar are conscious of the enormity of their expectations. No one would speak aloud the immense hopes. I'm counting on you to make my life meaningful. I'm counting on you to always be there for me. I'm counting on you to read my mind and anticipate all of my needs. I'm counting on you to bind my wounds and fulfill my deficits in my life. I'm counting on you to complete me, to make me a whole person, to heal my stricken soul. Even in those projections, I think what we see is this aligns not perfectly, but much more with what a parent was to provide for the child. And so oftentimes we go looking for, unconsciously, a partner who will finish the job that our parents didn't quite finish. And in the early stages, it works. In the early stages, you don't need to eat, right? You're totally consumed by pleasing the other person, by them pleasing you. And we call that pleasing, falling in love. We call that a marriage to begin with. But eventually, the capacity is going to be human and limited for both of you. Eventually, resentments will build when people don't learn to take care of themselves and develop a pattern where they're trying to make the other person the responsible one to walk in their shoes and to live their life. So we have to take this back. We have to shift our perspective. We have to unlearn what we learned about love, about relationships, about marriage. Hollis said, so to be fascinated by the other is to be possessed by an affected idea. This is what happens in projection. In the most rabid stage of being in love, and rabid is by no means too strong of a word, one is unable to do anything other than obsess over the other. One is caught in a projective identification with the heart's desires. The boundary between self and other dissolves, and as they did for the infant. Accepting the journey obliges one to accept fear and to let go of our chief fantasies. We have to confront and face ourselves. Our partner, our marriage, all the other relationships and jobs for that matter, really will expose the parts of ourselves that we have not faced, the parts of ourselves that we have not integrated. We'll be confronted with those parts and the way to find them is the guilt and the shame that we feel when we're trying to heal, when we're trying to set boundaries, when we're trying to say no, when we're trying to make tough decisions, right? Like I always say, getting healthier will inevitably cause you to feel guilt and shame. So we have to give up those as our guiding North Star. There's a good news in this idea of projection. All projection, Hollis says, occurs unconsciously, of course. For the moment that one observes, I have made a projection, one is already in the process of taking it back. More commonly, we only begin to reclaim our purchase on consciousness when the other fails to catch, hold, or reflect our projection. If there's an essential law of the psyche, it is that what was unconscious will be projected. This is why it is observed that the quote, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. But since the psychic consists of a multiple of split off shards of energy, complex in archetypal forms, virtually all of which are unconscious, there's always ample opportunity for projection. And as I can never know the unconscious by definition of practice, so I can never know what energies I might be acting. Let me put that in English. What that means is that there are elements to ourselves. There are energies, there are patterns, there are scripts, there are ideas, there are neurological pathways that we're not conscious of. And these patterns attract us to certain other energies that feel like home, that feel like the mother and father that we never had, that feel like the nurturing home that we never had. Even that is the projection, right? That outside is my home. The home that we seek is us. Everything you're looking for in life, for peace, for enlightenment, for what prophets call heaven, is in you. Right? From the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which I so often quote to make this point, the kingdom of heaven is within you, and he who knows himself shall find it. That's what it is. When you strip away the projections, when you let go of expecting and hoping that somebody else will rescue, somebody else is coming on the white horse to rescue you. I mean, that was one of the big lessons of my own midlife crisis, is that nobody was coming to rescue me. Yes, there are people that support me on my journey, walk beside me on my journey, but I had to do it myself. I have to do it repeatedly myself. I'm still struggling with it every day as a human, to know that I bear the chief responsibility for my journey. And that doesn't mean that I'm alone in this world. In fact, being connected to my soul means, in a sense, that one would never be lonely. But that is what I'm seeking. That's what we're looking for in this process. We're looking for our own souls, for our own psyche, for our own self-awareness. I talk about this often. When somebody says to me, for example, and this is not uncommon, my ex-wife, my ex-husband is a narcissist or borderline or an alcoholic, I respond by saying something like, that's interesting. But what's really compelling is discovering why you were attracted to someone like that in the first place. So yes, it may be true that your partner has a diagnosis. In fact, I would argue in terms of the continuum that everybody has a theme or a style of mental health and mental illness. That's true. But the question is, why are you attracted to that person? I've joked about this, but it's a truth that, when my wife was beating herself up one evening about how anxious she was, I said, even if you disappeared off the face of the earth, I would find another anxious middle-aged woman to marry, because that's the thing that I guess I'm attracted to, right? That reminds me of home. That's what's familiar to me. Because I think to myself, if I can rescue my mother, if I can save her from her depression, from her fear and anxiety, then I'll be a good son. I'll have saved myself in the process, I imagine, at an unconscious level. So I'm going to go back to that over and over again. So yes, I can be mad and frustrated and exhausted by her mental health issues, just like she can mine. But until I see the aspects in me that draw me to that and begin to unravel, to heal, to understand those, nothing will change. I could go through life, I could get married and divorced over and over again, but until I change, nothing changes in those. In fact, I'll find myself, on the surface, it always looks different. On the surface, our spouses look different than our parents. And if you are divorced and remarried like I am, our new partner seems different. We have evidence. We talk about how they're different. But at a fundamental, deep level, I still thought that I was going to be the savior, that I was going to be the knight in shining armor, and I wanted that sense of being loved and good and worthwhile. And I thought if I did that, that's what I would feel. That's my dilemma. That's what burdens both of us. Joseph Campbell said, I think that one of the problems in marriage is that people don't realize what it is. They think that it's a lifelong love affair, and it isn't. Marriage has nothing to do with being happy. It has everything to do with being transformed. And when that transformation is realized, it is a magnificent experience. But you have to submit. You have to yield. You have to give. You cannot just dictate. Hollis goes on to add, transformation is about enlargement, and enlargement generally comes from suffering. Right? These are what these relationships teach us about. They eventually reveal the parts in us that are immature, that are underdeveloped, that we have been avoiding our entire lives. And if we don't recognize that, then all we'll think is that our partner is a monster. We'll have diagnoses for them. We'll tell stories about them. We'll break up or divorce, and we'll feel justified and self-righteous because we will be able to accurately identify their weaknesses just like they can do to us. But that's not the thing that's remarkable in our growth journey, being able to see somebody else's problems. First-year graduate students can do that with some level of expertise. The real gift, the real intelligence is being able to see yourself. So I wrote, for marriage to be successful, this is the title of this broadcast, for marriage to be successful, you must fall in love with your partner's dilemma over and over again. You see, because children are required to navigate their parents' defenses to survive childhood, they develop in such a way that they end up relating to people who are the same shape, size, and color of their parents, metaphorically speaking. In other words, we become shaped by a certain kind of compromised person, a human being. And as we grow up, we are inclined to relate to those same kinds of people. The shape of our wounds predisposes us to fit with others who mirror, in some ways, our original contexts. The work then is to come to know this by unraveling our childhoods, good, bad, and in between, so that we make friends with ourselves. And if we are lucky, we find a partner who is willing to travel a similar path that is theirs. And if that happens, it's absolute bliss. Like I said, romantic love is the discovery of a home that never was. And when the projections fall away, as they must, the work for an enduring love begins. Joseph Campbell explained that in marriage, eventually facts will break through, destroying the projections of the early stages of romantic relationship. And what comes next, he says, is love. In marriage, he taught, we must learn to transform our passion into compassion. That is essentially what I mean by falling in love with your partner's dilemma. When I see my wife acting out on me, and I learn to sit with her dilemma, to be in love with it, to have compassion for it, I respond to her in a completely different way. When I don't see that, when I don't see her wounds, I get into the battle with her. I fight, I blame, I name call, I punish, right, to try to control her. And my favorite part about growing up in this process, Heinz Kohut once said, the great analyst said, that a good marriage is when only one partner goes crazy at a time. One of my most satisfying phenomena on my growth journey, my healing journey, is when my wife is in her dilemma and it doesn't get in. I'm not distant from it. I'm not running away. I'm not punishing, but I'm not absorbing it. I can see her. I can respond with patience, with capacity, with love. And anything I say or do from that place will be helpful, versus if I don't see that, then most of what I do will feed into it. And you know what? You're also allowed to leave. As I often teach, divorce, some people come to me and say, divorce isn't an option. And I say, it has to be an option. If it's not an option, then you're not choosing to stay married, and that's not love. That's not commitment. So you're allowed to leave. But whether you leave or not, you have the same psychological work to do. And if you don't do it, you will recreate the same thing again because of it being unconscious and because of your projections. in my experience as a therapist and a partner, soulmate is a term that is earned through the long, painful, and difficult work of taking back our projections and becoming who we are. If the marriage survives this process, it becomes something absolutely magnificent. I recently have shared this quote, shared it several times, but somebody asked me to explain a little bit more, so I want to. The quote that I shared, that you may have heard, that my therapist said to me sometime last year, she said, "That's the thing about psychotherapy. The news just gets worse and worse. But," and I added this, "you start to feel better and better." So what do I mean by the news gets worse and worse? Well, what I mean by that is, if therapy is about becoming more conscious, if therapy is about reclaiming the parts of ourselves that we have split off, jettisoned, repressed, that means I'm coming into contact with parts of myself, aspects of my personality, feelings, thoughts, ideas that I have been told are unacceptable and are unlovable. So that is an absolutely terrifying and uncomfortable process. And when she said the news gets worse and worse, we both chuckled at that, because that's what it feels like. It's hard. Enlightenment is a destructive, terrifying process. It is uncomfortable. Robin Robertson in The Shadow's Gift wrote, "There is nothing so frightening as facing the darkness within." And darkness is it's not really darkness. Darkness is representative of our unconscious, right? Even the words that we have for the stuff are demons, right? Fighting your demons or your darkness. That's how we feel toward them. And so demons become this symbol, this archetype of maybe anger or sadness or grief or our needs or our fear. The things that our parents found exhausting. The feelings and thoughts and ideas that the big people when we were young, told us were inadmissible, unforgivable, unacceptable. So when you find something in yourself that you have been taught, conditioned to believe your entire life is unacceptable, when your partner exposes that in you, the primitive response is to feel rage for them, to find fault in them. The healed response is to sit with yourself. And like I've said recently so clearly, that's why self-compassion is the key. Grace, self-forgiveness is the key. And how does one develop self-compassion? Well, by and through the compassion of another person. As my friend recently said on one of our podcasts, somebody with a vested authority to bless our lives, to forgive us from the inevitable sin of unconsciousness. Going on with Robin Robertson's quote from The Shadow's Gift, "We will do almost anything to avoid having to look into the dark places of our soul. And rightly so. The darkness contains much more than we humans can face." That is the work. That is the invitation. So if you have the opportunity, if you've done a Finding You, if you want to do couples work, if you want to develop more intimacy, if you want to develop more self-awareness, sitting with your partner and watching and understanding that the things that he or she or they tell you or about you existed long before you ever met. The things that our children expose in us, the limitations and weaknesses that get exposed through parenting and in our intimate relationships, existed long before the current set of characters were on the scene. So it is an invitation to go back. And this is not, I want to be clear, this is not my idea. Yes, I curate these quotes and these ideas and I put them together in my own arrangement. But the music came centuries before I was born. Right? This is the wisdom from ancient humanity to today. We either do the work of making the unconscious conscious, or we disown it and we project it onto others. And we call our life fate. It just happened to us. I think that that's what sin was originally about. It was about unconsciousness. You know, it's not about the commandment of thou shalt or thou shalt not. I was reading a book recently for a client, a young client that I was working with, self-help book. And I was listening to the instruction, and it was solid principles and instruction about these are the kinds of thoughts you're going to need to develop. This is what you need to see. This is the way you need to start organizing your ideas, your thoughts. And I said, that's true, but how does one do that? Well, one does that by feeling differently in their bodies, by learning to feel differently, by learning to feel safe, but by being the sensation of being seen and understood, connected to. We spend time with others who have the capacity to see us. And that heals us, that helps us to find ourselves. Then the things that this author was suggesting in the book are things that we can do more effectively and more skillfully. One of my favorite books is on this subject, and every time I talk about couples, I quote from it, is The Eden Project by James Hollis. He likes to share in the book that some people, when they initially hear him talk about the kinds of things that I'm discussing tonight, that they say that he's not romantic, that he's destroying romance, destroying love even. And he says, on the contrary, the ideas that I'm offering that are really just passing through him are expanding our ideas of love, enlarging our perspectives on love. The kind of love that we were taught about as children is so narrow and small typically than what it really encompasses. We have to go out on this perilous journey, and metaphorically, the hero goes out alone. Now, in life, we can have a guide that will walk beside us. We can have people that support us, a sponsor, a mentor, a group, close friends, a psychotherapist, right? These are the people that support us, loved ones. But ultimately, you're going to have to face it alone, which means that you have to face it in you. Nobody else can do the work for you. Nobody else can breathe your breath. Now, I must tell you that because of my childhood wounding, having a single mother that was overwhelmed, I found my belonging. I found my shape. My wounds were carved by taking care of her. It was all unconscious. It was invisible to the naked eye. It actually created the opportunity for me to become a therapist, because my wound, like everybody's, my wound is so close to my gifts. So then I become a therapist, get married, have children, do those things. And eventually I have the experience, like everybody does, that I can't do it. It's too much need, too much that pulls at me. And I try to be strong and I try to hold it up. But as we learn, the body keeps the score. And somewhere, somehow, the unmet need inside of me, the little boy inside of me who just needed to be taken care of, to be seen, to be loved by a person, by a whole person, that boy begins to scream and to cry. And the way that he does it is through symptoms. And those symptoms take on a certain kind of pattern because of my own predispositions, my own styles. And that pattern, that style, we call a diagnosis. And then if you find a therapist who thinks in the way that we're talking about tonight, that therapist helps you understand your dilemma. And if your partner knows what your dilemma is, they can sit with you, because it's not about you. You know, when I can see her dilemma so clearly, I can sit with her, because it's not an assault on me. Even if it is on the surface, superficially sounding and looking like an assault, I realize it has nothing to do with me. Not really. And if it does have something to do with me, then that is something that becomes clear through the tool of my own self-awareness. The goal is to become conscious. And it's a lifelong journey. One never becomes fully conscious. So there's always something to be striving for, something to be working for. And we don't get hopeless or sad because we never arrive. But we develop what people call enlightenment, which is learning to love over and over again our own horrible, rotten self. The parts of ourselves that we have been taught were unacceptable and unlovable. And when we find contact and embrace those parts of ourselves, our compassion for everybody else expands exponentially, automatically from that place. So if you want to sit with your partner, if you have the instinct, the urge, the courage to do a finding you and to do it with your partner, you're creating a foundation for a greater level of intimacy. So many people are afraid to do their work because they're afraid it's going to be used against them. And of course, that's because that's what's happened to them in their past. I haven't shared this in a while, but my youngest was having some problems in school. And as she was telling the story, it wasn't quite clear to me that what she was saying was entirely wrong. So we had a conference with her teacher. It was a phone conference, and the teacher was explaining this, how difficult my daughter was being in class. And basically what became apparent to me in this discussion is that my daughter was literally out loud confronting the teacher on shaming kids. But because the teacher had more authority, and I respect how impossible it is to be a teacher. The teacher used her power to punish my daughter back. But after a long conversation, the teacher let down her walls and said, you know, I may have done some of that. And Liv can be very insightful and aware of herself. And I'm sorry. And I said to her, I cannot tell you how much that means to me as a father to hear you say that. Incredibly courageous. And she said to me, well, you know, I'm afraid to admit mistakes because some parents use it against me. And I said, not in this family, we don't. In this family, we celebrate the expression of vulnerability, the expression of consciousness. And the teacher, of course, was very grateful. And the relationship between the teacher, my daughter was on the phone call too. The relationship between the teacher and my daughter improved dramatically from that point forward. They found a relationship that worked for them. In the Eden Project, if there's a single idea which permeates this essay, this book that he had written, it is that the quality of all our relationships is a direct function of the relationship we have to ourselves. So much of the relationship to ourselves operates at an unconscious level. Most of the drama and dynamics of our relationships to others and to the transcendent is an expression of our own personal psychology. That saying that a teacher said to me one time, that what you tell me about the devil tells me more about you than it does about the devil, is what we're talking about here. Going on, Hollis says in the Eden Project, the best thing we can do for our relationship with the transcendent then is to render our relationship to ourselves more conscious. This is not a narcissistic activity. In fact, it will prove to be the most loving thing that we can do for the other, right? That idea that the only thing that I can do for you is to work on myself, and the only thing you can do for me is to work on yourself. That the greatest gift that a parent can give to the child is their own work. This is not a narcissistic activity. In fact, it will prove to be the most loving thing that we can do for the other. The greatest gift to the others is our own best selves. Thus, paradoxically, if we are to serve our relationship well, we are obliged to affirm our own individual journey. That is the invite. That is the call. I don't care if you have a child that's suffering. I don't care if there's what it is, what the circumstances are that are causing your distress. The work is to greater consciousness, greater empowerment, greater freedom. And that all comes from rendering, like Hollis says, our relationships to ourselves more conscious. And when one experiences that expansion, it is sublime. When one experiences that expansion, they experience themselves as a more loving person, a more kind person, more assertive person, more clear person, more honest person, more courageous person, more grounded person. And in the context of tonight, a person more capable of loving others. Thich Nhat Hanh, as you know, if you listen to this, said that listening is love's other name. But you can only listen insofar as you are healed, because if you're still unhealed, then every feeling, every thought, every idea, every reaction everybody has around you gets interpreted through that lens. And the defense is likely to be raised. But the fact of the matter is that our triggers are our responsibility. We didn't cause them, but they are ours. And so we discover and look back and find the original context of our wounds. That is to say, our childhoods. We visit there. We talk about it. Not to stay stuck, not to develop a victim identity, but to free ourselves from it. So that when we realize we're in the same repetitive fight over and over again with our partner that seems to have no resolution, but just remains persistently insoluble, then we realize that there's some historical work that needs to be done, because we're not fighting about what we think we're fighting about. The kind of things that come out of this is we develop less resentment. We become much more capable and skillful at self-care. We learn to say no as a complete sentence. We learn to accept the judgments, the arrows, the slings that others cast at us. And it's not just that we're able to handle the hurts and the insults better, it's that they don't hurt and insult us anymore. This is not a doctrine where you learn to white knuckle it better and you just get stronger, although you do get stronger. It's not about just getting stronger so that you can handle the pain of the assault. It is that it doesn't feel like an assault anymore, because it is not about you, right? That's what Don Miguel Ruiz says in the Four Agreements. Don't take anything personal. And what he means is, whether somebody loves you, admires you, vilifies you, puts you on a pedestal, that is about them. How people see and respond to you is much more indicative of their level of consciousness than anything about you. And if there's feedback there, then your expanding consciousness will catch it. We'll see it. We'll reflect upon it. So to fall in love with your partner's dilemma goes hand in hand with becoming more conscious yourself. And to fall in love with your partner's dilemma gives both of you the freedom. You stop responding and seeing the world through your trauma lens, and you start seeing it through your healed lens. You develop greater patience for them, more capacity to love, more capacity to listen, to sit with them. You become less defensive, less reactive, because you know who you are. And when you know who you are, you know who they are. If you don't know who you are, you don't know who anyone is. Or to the extent, because these are all continuums, right? So that is the invitation. That's the literal and the figurative invitation to doing your work and doing your work as a couple. If you are interested, contact us at info@findingyouprograms.com for this workshop that Michelle and I will be running. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity of You, are available on Amazon and Audible. Like I mentioned, May 16th is the next online Finding You workshop. June 4th through 8th is the one that I'll be running. July 23rd through 27th, Emma will be leading that one. Emma Reedy June. Conscious Parenting Workshop in the Bay Area, May 10th, 9 to 4. We still have a couple of spots left. If you're interested, check it out. May 19th will be the online version. The workshop that I mentioned, the couples workshop, will be June 18th through 20th. For private inquiries, private intensives, feedback, questions, coaching if you want to coach, info@findingyouprograms.com is your key. Go to the E-Omega workshop if you're interested in the 5-day workshop in October. Next week, I'll be talking about conscious parenting, a teaser. I do these workshops, and this will be a teaser of what I teach and talk about and the exercises that we do at that workshop. So that's a week from today, May 13th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I look forward to that. I hope this is a helpful point of contact. And as always, because I hope that this broadcast is a tool in your life that can help you to expand your consciousness, your awareness, that can give you the courage, the sense of safety to go back and look at the things that have felt so threatened to you because of your history and your context. In other words, thank you for showing up to these, because your participation, your listening, the change that that has in you makes all the difference in the world. It makes the world a safer, better, happier place. So thank you for that. Have a great evening, folks. I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care. Bye-bye.